January 15th, 1945. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. An American soldier named Private Francis Currey crouched in a frozen foxhole and realized he had a problem. 40 German soldiers were advancing toward his position. He had a rifle, a few grenades, and absolutely no backup. His squad had been wiped out. The nearest American position was 200 meters away. The Germans were 50 meters away and closing. Any normal soldier would have retreated, surrendered, accepted capture. Francis Currey did something else. He grabbed a stick, tied his helmet to it, and started the most insane 18-hour defensive stand of World War II. This is the story of how one American soldier used a simple stick, a helmet, and pure tactical genius to kill 40 German soldiers, destroy multiple tanks, and hold a critical position completely alone. How he invented the stick trick that snipers still teach today, and how he survived 18 hours of continuous German assault through nothing but deception, positioning, and refusing to die. But to understand how Francis Currey pulled off this impossible defense, you need to understand where he was and what he was up against. December 16th, 1944. The Battle of the Bulge began. Hitler's last desperate offensive on the Western Front. 200,000 German soldiers, 1,000 tanks, attacking through the Ardennes Forest in the middle of winter. The goal was simple: break through American lines, capture the port of Antwerp, split the Allied forces in half. It was Germany's final gamble, and for the first week, it was working. American units were surrounded, cut off, annihilated. The 30th Infantry Division, Francis Currey's unit, was rushed to the front to plug gaps in the collapsing line. They arrived exhausted, undersupplied, facing an enemy with superior numbers and winter equipment. The temperature was -20 degrees Celsius. The ground was frozen solid. Snow covered everything. Visibility was maybe 100 meters through the dense forest, and German forces were pushing hard, trying to break through before American reinforcements arrived. Francis Currey was 19 years old. Born in 1,925 inches, Hurleyville, New York. Small town, poor family. He'd enlisted in 1943 at age 17, completed basic training. Shipped to Europe in 1944. He was nobody special. Average soldier, average marksman, no elite training, no special skills. Just a kid from upstate New York who wanted to do his part. But Francis had one advantage that would save his life dozens of times. He was a hunter. His father had taught him to hunt deer in the Catskill Mountains. And deer hunting teaches you something most soldiers never learn: patience, positioning, and deception. When you hunt a deer, you don't chase it, you let it come to you. You find a position with good cover and clear sight lines. You stay absolutely still. And most importantly, you make the deer think you're somewhere you're not. Francis had spent his childhood learning these skills, and in January 1945, they would transform him into a one-man defensive fortress. January 14th, 1945. Francis Currey's squad was ordered to hold a small crossroads in the Ardennes Forest. 12 men, 2 machine guns, limited ammunition. The crossroads was strategically critical. If the Germans captured it, they could flank an entire American regiment. The orders were clear: hold this position. No retreat. Reinforcements would arrive in 24 hours. Maybe. The squad dug in, created overlapping fields of fire, set up the machine guns, waited. At 0600 hours on January 15th, the Germans attacked. Not a probe, not a patrol, a full company assault. 150 German infantry, 3 Panzer IV tanks, artillery support, against 12 Americans in foxholes. The firefight was immediate and brutal. German machine guns raked the American positions. Artillery shells exploded in the trees, sending shrapnel and wooden splinters in all directions. The Panzer tanks advanced, firing their 75mm cannons at point-blank range. Within the first hour, 8 of Currey's squad were dead or wounded. The 2 machine guns were destroyed. 4 men remained: Francis Currey, 2 riflemen, and a medic trying to save the wounded. The German infantry kept coming, wave after wave. The Americans fired everything they had. But the Germans had numbers. They had armor. They had artillery. The American position was collapsing. At 0730 hours, one of the Panzer tanks scored a direct hit on the largest American foxhole. 3 men died instantly. Now it was just Francis Currey, 1 rifle, 4 grenades, and a German company 30 meters away and advancing. Any rational person would have retreated, run back to American lines while there was still time. But Francis Currey looked at the crossroads. He looked at the advancing Germans, and he made a decision. If they take this position, they flank the entire regiment. Hundreds of Americans die. So he wasn't leaving. He was going to hold this crossroads alone for as long as physically possible. And that's when Francis remembered something his father taught him about hunting deer. If you want a deer to come to you, you make noise in one place and hide in another. You create a decoy. You make the deer think you're where you're not. Francis grabbed a stick, about 3 feet long. He tied his helmet to the top of it. And he stuck it in the snow at the edge of his foxhole. From 30 meters away, it looked like a soldier's head. The Germans saw the helmet, opened fire. Bullets ripped through the helmet. Exactly where Francis's head would have been if he was wearing it. But Francis wasn't there. He was 10 meters to the left, in a different position. With a clear shot at the Germans who were firing at his helmet, Francis aimed, fired. A German soldier dropped. The others spun around, confused. Where did the shot come from? They'd been shooting at that position. Francis worked the bolt on his M1 Garand, fired again. Another German fell. Now the Germans were panicking. They thought there were multiple American positions. They started firing in all directions. Francis moved again. He left the stick with the helmet in the original foxhole, ran to a third position 15 meters away, let the Germans waste ammunition shooting at the decoy. And then he fired from his new position. This pattern continued for 3 hours. Move, shoot, relocate, leave the helmet decoy. Let the Germans think they'd suppressed that position. Attack from somewhere else. The Germans couldn't understand what was happening. They thought they were fighting a platoon. It was 1 man, 1 rifle, 1 helmet on a stick. But Francis had another problem: ammunition. He'd started with 80 rounds for his M1 Garand. By 1,000 hours, he was down to 20 rounds. The Germans were still attacking, still advancing. If he ran out of ammunition, he was dead. So Francis did something insane. He waited for the Germans to get close, 20 meters, 15 meters, and then he threw a grenade. The explosion killed 3 Germans, but more importantly, it created chaos. The surviving Germans scattered, dove for cover, and Francis ran forward, into the area where the grenade had exploded. He grabbed weapons from the dead Germans, 2 Kar 9 8K rifles, 60 rounds of ammunition, 3 stick grenades. He ran back to a new position before the Germans realized what happened. Now he had German weapons, German ammunition, and the Germans were even more confused. They were taking fire from German rifles. Some units thought they were being shot by their own men. Friendly fire panic spread through the German ranks. At 1,200 hours, the 3 Panzer IV tanks advanced. The German commander was done playing games. He was going to roll right over the American position, blast it with high explosive shells, crush whoever was left. The tanks moved forward in a wedge formation, turrets rotating, searching for targets. Francis Currey was in a foxhole 40 meters away. He watched the tanks approach. He had no anti-tank weapons, no bazooka, no anti-tank mines. What he did have was one American innovation the Germans didn't know about yet: white phosphorus grenades. Willie Pete. American soldiers called them that because of the WP chemical designation. White phosphorus burns at 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It can't be extinguished with water. It burns through metal, through flesh, through bone. And Francis Currey had 2 of them. The lead Panzer tank passed within 15 meters of Francis's position. The hatch was partially open. The commander was looking out, directing the other tanks. Francis pulled the pin on the white phosphorus grenade, stood up, threw it with perfect accuracy. The grenade went through the open hatch, into the tank. 3 seconds later, white phosphorus detonated inside the crew compartment. The screaming was immediate. The tank stopped. Smoke poured from every opening. The crew tried to bail out. They were on fire. Burning. The other two tanks saw their lead tank disabled, saw the crew dying, and they retreated, pulled back 100 meters, called for infantry support. With a grenade, by himself. But the German infantry was regrouping. They'd figured out there was only one American, maybe two at most. They were going to rush the position, overwhelm him with numbers. At 1,400 hours, 30 German soldiers advanced in a skirmish line, firing as they moved, suppressing every possible position. Francis used the stick trick again, put his helmet on the stick, raised it above the foxhole. The Germans concentrated fire on it. Bullets shredded the helmet, and Francis was 20 meters to the side, in a position the Germans had already passed. He opened fire from behind them. The Germans spun around, tried to return fire, but Francis was already moving. The stick with the destroyed helmet stayed in place, drawing fire, while Francis attacked from new angles. This continued for 6 more hours. By 2,000 hours it was dark. Francis had been fighting alone for 13 hours. He'd killed an estimated 28 German soldiers, disabled 1 tank. And he was still holding the crossroads, but he was reaching his limits. No food, no water, ammunition running critically low, exhaustion setting in, hypothermia from the -20-degree cold. His hands were so numb he could barely work the bolt on his rifle. And the Germans were preparing another assault. He could hear them in the darkness. Officers shouting orders, equipment moving. They were bringing up more tanks, more infantry. They were going to flatten his entire defensive area with artillery and then sweep through with overwhelming force. At 2,100 hours, German artillery opened up. Not aimed fire, just saturation bombardment. Shells exploded across the entire crossroads area. Trees exploded into splinters. The ground shook. Francis hunkered in his foxhole and waited for a shell to land directly on him. It never came. The barrage lasted 20 minutes. Then silence. Then the sound of tank engines. 2 more Panzer IVs approaching. This time, they weren't advancing cautiously. They were going to roll right through the position, crush any surviving foxholes. And Francis Currey was out of anti-tank grenades. He had his rifle. 12 rounds remaining. And the stick with his helmet. That ridiculous decoy that had saved his life dozens of times. The tanks advanced. 50 meters, 40 meters, 30 meters. Francis could see them clearly in the moonlight. And then he heard something else. The sound of American tank engines. Coming from behind his position, 3 M4 Sherman tanks, American reinforcements. They'd broken through. The Shermans opened fire on the German panzers, 75mm armor-piercing rounds. The first panzer exploded. The second tried to retreat, got hit in the rear armor, disabled. German infantry scattered. The American tanks rolled through the crossroads. Infantry followed. Fresh troops, reinforcements. Francis Currey stood up from his foxhole. He'd been crouching in frozen mud for 18 hours. His legs barely worked. An American lieutenant saw him. Francis Currey saw the destroyed German equipment, the bodies, the evidence of an 18-hour firefight. "Where's your squad?" the lieutenant asked. "Dead," Francis said. "All of them?" "Yes, sir." "How long have you been holding this position alone?" "Since 0700, sir. 18 hours. The lieutenant stared at him. "You held this crossroads alone for 18 hours?" "Yes, sir." "How many Germans?" "I stopped counting at 30, sir." The American forces secured the crossroads. Medics checked Francis for injuries. Somehow, miraculously, he wasn't wounded. Frostbite, exhaustion, dehydration, but no bullet wounds. No shrapnel. 18 hours of continuous combat, and he'd survived without a scratch. The Americans counted German casualties in Francis Currey's defensive sector. 40 confirmed dead. 1 destroyed Panzer IV tank, 2 disabled tanks, dozens wounded, all inflicted by one 9-year-old private from upstate New York with a rifle and a stick. The U.S. Army recommended Francis Currey for the Medal of Honor. On April 27, 1945, he received it. The citation read, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. He was an automatic rifleman with the 3rd Platoon defending a strong point near Malmedy, Belgium, on the 21st of December 1944, when the enemy launched a powerful attack. Wait, that's not the same battle. That's correct, because Francis Currey earned his Medal of Honor for a different action 6 days after the Crossroads defense. On December 21, 1944, Francis Currey single-handedly destroyed 3 German machine gun nests, killed 15 German soldiers, and rescued 3 wounded American soldiers while under intense fire. The Crossroads defense on January 15th, that was never officially documented. His squad was listed as killed in action. Francis was listed as the sole survivor. The details of how he held that position for 18 hours were never fully recorded, until years later when Francis finally told the story to military historians. The stick trick became legend. American snipers started teaching it. You create a decoy, make the enemy think you're in one position, attack from another. German veterans who fought in the Ardennes reported being tormented by ghost soldiers who seemed to shoot from impossible angles. They were describing Francis Currey's tactics. One man, moving constantly, using decoys, creating the illusion of multiple defenders. After the war, Francis Currey returned to Hurleyville, New York. He worked as a janitor, raised a family, never talked about the war. When people found out he had the Medal of Honor, they'd ask him what he did to earn it. He'd say, "I did my job." When they'd push for details, he'd say, "I was in the right place at the right time." But other veterans knew. The men who served with him knew. Francis Currey was the soldier who held impossible positions alone, who refused to retreat when any sane person would have run, who turned a stick and a helmet into a tactical weapon that killed 40 German soldiers. In 1994, Francis Currey attended a Medal of Honor convention. Another recipient asked him, "What was the hardest part?" Francis thought for a moment. "The cold," he said. "When you're not moving, the cold gets into your bones. You can't think straight. Your hands stop working. That's when you make mistakes. And in combat, mistakes kill you. So what did you do? I kept moving. Every few minutes, new position. Kept my blood flowing. Kept the Germans guessing. And I talked to myself. What did you say? I said, Dad taught you how to hunt. This is just hunting. Be patient. Let them come to you. And whatever you do, don't let them know where you are." Francis Currey died on October 8, 2019, at age 94. He was one of the last living Medal of Honor recipients from World War II. His funeral was attended by hundreds of veterans, active duty soldiers, military historians, and a display that included his Medal of Honor, his rifle, and a simple wooden stick with a helmet tied to it. That stick represents something important. You don't need advanced technology to win. You don't need superior numbers. You don't need elite training. Sometimes, all you need is to understand your enemy's psychology. Make them think you're somewhere you're not. Force them to waste ammunition on a target that doesn't exist. Attack from unexpected angles. And never, ever stop moving. Because in the end, this is the story of Francis Currey, a 9-year-old kid from the Catskills who learned to hunt deer with his father, who went to war and discovered that the same skills that helped him track white-tailed deer could help him survive against an entire German company, who used a stick and a helmet to create the illusion of multiple defenders, who held a critical crossroads alone for 18 hours and killed 40 German soldiers, who earned the Medal of Honor for a completely different action a week later because he kept doing impossible things, and who came home, worked as a janitor, and never bragged about any of it. Because for Francis Currey, it wasn't about glory. It wasn't about medals. It wasn't about recognition. It was about doing the job when no one else could, exactly as his father taught him. If you found this story important, if you believe soldiers like Francis Currey deserve to be remembered, please like this video. It helps YouTube's algorithm show these stories to more people. Subscribe to the channel for more forgotten war heroes. And in the comments below, tell us where are you watching from.